The package arrived on the coldest day of winter. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photo of a child with pearl-white hair. The note read, "She needs a home." The Frost family lived in the big blue house on Oak Street. They had wanted another child for years, so when the agency called, they said yes without hesitation. Nobody told them why her last 5 families had given her up. The girl called herself Winter. She was small for 10 years old, with skin so pale it seemed to glow in the dark. She brought only a tiny suitcase filled with empty glass jars. "What are the jars for?" asked Maya, their youngest daughter. "For collecting things that nobody can see," Winter replied, her voice like wind chimes in an empty room. Strange things started happening the day Winter moved in. The clocks in the house began running backward. Maya's favourite toy, a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Flop, was found torn to pieces on the front porch. The family cat hissed and hid every time Winter walked by, and the family dog refused to come inside, howling at Winter's window all night long. At breakfast, Winter would tell stories about the family members' dreams. Not usual dreams, but the ones they couldn't remember, the ones that made them wake up crying. She knew every detail. When asked how, she would smile and tap her empty jars. The children at school said Winter had no reflection. The teachers said she answered questions before they were asked. During parent meetings, she would sit in the corner, filling her jars with something that made the air shimmer. One morning, Mrs. Frost found all the family photos changed. In every picture going back 30 years, Winter stood in the background watching, even in photos from before she was born. The neighbours started to forget they had ever seen the Frost family without Winter. The mail carrier delivered letters addressed to her from people who had died years ago. Birds stopped singing when she walked outside. The family's daughter began to change first. She stopped casting a shadow. Then she started finishing Winter's sentences. After that, she began collecting her own jars. Mr. Frost tried calling the agency, but the numbers didn't work anymore. The office address led to an empty lot that had been empty for 50 years. When he checked Winter's paperwork again, the pages were blank except for one sentence. "She's not collecting jars, she's collecting families." The Frost family grew silent, hollow, like echoes inside their own home. Winter's presence was everywhere, her pale face lurking in corners, her jars multiplying, filling the shelves and floors. Mrs. Frost started waking in strange places. Once she found herself in the basement, staring at a pile of photographs she didn't remember taking. Each one was of her family members. Mr. Frost had begun to fade. He no longer remembered his own name when Winter looked at him. His thoughts unravelled, becoming soft whispers he couldn't hold on to, whispers that only Winter seemed to hear. Then one evening, Mrs. Frost found Winter in the attic, surrounded by hundreds of jars, each one containing something that moved and throbbed in the dim light. She tried to scream, but Winter turned, eyes like deep black wells, and raised a finger to her lips. Mrs. Frost felt her voice wither in her throat as if it had been stolen. Winter leaned in close, whispering in her ear, "They're almost ready." "Who?" Mrs. Frost managed to gasp with a faint voice. "All of them," Winter replied, her lips twisting into a smile. "The ones who came before you. The ones who left, the ones who gave me up." Mrs. Frost's heart pounded as she backed away, realizing that each jar held not just something invisible, but fragments of lives. That night, Mrs. Frost gathered her family, desperate to escape. But as they fled to the door, they found Winter standing there, blocking the way with her small suitcase at her feet. Her face was expressionless, her eyes endless and cold. "You can't leave," she whispered. "Not now. Not ever." The next morning, the neighbours noticed the Frost house was still, quiet the windows darkened, covered in a layer of frost as thick as ice. Days passed, then weeks. The mail piled up, untouched, and soon no one remembered the Frosts had ever lived there, except for Winter. The agency soon received a call from a family on Maple Street. They too had been looking for a child to fill their home. And so, on the coldest day of winter, a package arrived at their door with a photograph of a girl and a single note. She needs a home.